dumpster fires, shopping trolleys and the mayor from Jaws. Dominic Cummings savages Boris Johnson at a box office COVID inquiry. Sir Keir Starmer is mobbed by angry protesters after defying Labour MPs demanding a ceasefire in Gaza. And in a TalkTV exclusive, pathetic police are found to be giving rogue cyclists a free ride. Joining me on tonight's Lycra free lineup are James Max, Penny Smith, Tessa Dunlop and Kevin O'Sullivan. But first to an extraordinary day at the COVID inquiry where Boris Johnson's sidekick turned enemy Dominic Cummings took centre stage for the first time. Appearing to revel in the drama, the former number 10 chief raged against his former boss and the government's shambolic approach to the pandemic. Quizzed by Hugo Keith KC, Cummings was shown explicit WhatsApp messages in which he described ministers as useless F pigs.
You called ministers useless pigs, morons, in emails and WhatsApps to your professional colleagues. Do you think you contributed to a lack of effectiveness on the part of ministers and of the cabinet?
No, I think I was reflecting a widespread view amongst competent people at the centre of power at the time about the calibre of a lot of senior people who are dealing with this crisis extremely badly.
Johnson's once closest ally and kingpin of the Vote Leave campaign described the chaotic cabinet office and the frustration he felt at Johnson's inability to make vital decisions at pivotal moments.
The cabinet office was a bomb site, and we had a huge problem of quality control of documents going into meetings and inconsistent data, inconsistent facts being read out. And many officials have come to me and said, this is causing chaos. There has to be some a formalised system to actually grip this, because the cabinet office was a dumpster fire.
You should trolley on it. Meaning?
Well, I'm just using the sort of generic term that we often used about the PM.
The term you used and his cabinet secretary used and his director of communications used and other officials, no doubt, about his propensity to...
Pretty much everyone called him the trolley, yeah.
...change direction.
Another of Boris's former aides also gave evidence today. Lee Kane was questioned on WhatsApp exchanges between himself and Cummings, in which they described the Prime Minister as being in full Jaws mode.
The PM at the time would refer to the mayor of Jaws from the film, who wanted to keep the beaches open. I think he had a routine from previous in his career where he would use that as a joke from one of his sort of after dinner speeches. But he sort of said, you know, there's more harm coming. The mayor was right all along to keep the beaches open, because it would have been long-term harm to the community. So it's a sort of reference to that.
And then Mr. Cummings says, I've literally said the same thing 10 times. He still won't absorb it. I'm exhausted just talking to him and stopping the trolley. I've had to sit here for 2 hours just to stop him saying and you say, I'm exhausted with him.
So I know I've seen on Twitter or X, and people are saying today, well, why are we still bothering with it? It was ages ago, move on. But for me, and for millions of people in this country who lost loved ones, my mum died of COVID during the pandemic, and because of the government's rules, we weren't allowed to go and see her. My best friend I had to say goodbye to over the telephone, which is no way to say goodbye to anyone you love, and that's because of the decisions that they made. So I want to know from this, who made those decisions? How do they come to decide what they're going to do? They said they were following the science all the way, but clearly from the evidence we've been presented today, they ignored the science, and Boris and his cohorts did what they thought was correct. And they're right. Why didn't we lock down the country? We're an island. Why weren't they stopping the planes? Why were they letting Ascot and Aintree? Why were they letting Atletico Madrid play Liverpool, having thousands of Spanish people flying across here when we knew that Spain was in the grip of the pandemic? There's so many questions I want answered from here. I won't be satisfied. And look, it's not a case of blame or guilty or innocent. It's just to learn from our mistakes.
Yeah, but I mean, the problem with this ludicrous inquiry is its remit is not to decide whether or not lockdowns worked or whether or not they were a sensible measure and whether or not we should use them in the future. The remit of this COVID inquiry, absurdly, is just, did we lock down early enough? Did we lock down for long enough? And many of us believe that we shouldn't have locked down at all, like Sweden, which ended up with a lower death rate than the rest of Europe, the only country that didn't lock down. The fact that this COVID inquiry is not looking into the efficacy of lockdowns is a scandal and a disgrace. Just, wait a second, Tessa. Just all that's happening here is lots of lawyers are making loads of money. Now, you're right. What we learned today if there was a story to come out of this, it was a good story today, or a shocking story, was the shocking shambles of what was going on. A dysfunctional Prime Minister, an absolutely dysfunctional number 10 Downing Street, an absolute mess, a total mess. And we learned also beforehand, the reason I never thought we really needed this COVID inquiry is because of our colleague Isabel Oakeshott and the WhatsApp files that she wrote. She had 1 million messages between ministers, and yes, they all call themselves juvenile names, silly little names. That's not the problem. What we learned from that is they weren't following the science. Mainly, they were following Nicola Sturgeon. It was, what's Nicola doing? Oh, she's taking 6 inches off the bottom of classroom doors in schools. Oh, we better do that. That was what they were following. They were not following the science. An utter shambles of a number 10 Downing Street. Lee Kane said, we had the wrong kind of Prime Minister. What does that mean? A useless Prime Minister? That's the sort of thing you should be annoyed about. But what we should really be annoyed about is the remit of this inquiry, which is not looking into whether or not lockdowns were justified or whether or not they actually worked. I don't think they did, and nor do millions of other people in this country.
I was led to believe that this inquiry was about ascertaining how well prepared we're going to be if and when there is another pandemic. Apparently, in terms of the possibilities of pandemics, this was a white swan, i.e. it was on the relative scale of pandemics, this wasn't as bad as it could be. And if a black swan comes down the line, a bit more like, say, the Spanish flu, which took out healthy young men, etc., then are we going to be ready? Are we going to have all our tanks on the lawn facing in the same direction? Because that lot, they couldn't organise a proverbial pee up in a brewery. They're all pointing in every direction except the same direction.
And also, you've got, well, when we talk about, I mean, I think what this points up, and I know what you're saying about the remit, and we all know as well that the way that, my goodness, these investigations grind on, we probably won't hear the end of this for another 7 years or whatever. I mean, just go on and on. It just feels, I mean, to a lot of people, ridiculous. It feels like such a ridiculous waste of money. But I think what it also points up is the calibre of the people that we had in charge then. Yeah. One of whom, the Prime Minister, who was helped into that position by a man who's now stabbing in the back. Well, not stabbing in the back, stabbing in the back again.
In the front.
As well, in the front or the side or everything else. I mean, the point is, as soon as he was out, he started doing the sort of briefing against, didn't he? But he was one of the ones who helped him in power. And when you heard, I mean, yes, we all slag off our colleagues, of course we do. But we do expect people who are running the country not to be doing this sort of thing. And also, the other thing that I don't know whether they're actually going to even look at is what the civil service was complaining about, which is that the fact that there was a power grab. They were trying to sort of, you know, so there was always this system of everything going through the civil service, and there was a routine. And that all went out the window, and as you said, headless chickens.
It was, but we all know that government is very often dysfunctional. We also know that they were grappling something that they didn't know, and I think you have to give them the benefit of the doubt in terms of trying to navigate something
at the beginning.
At the beginning, unprecedented. And of course, hindsight is a wonderful thing. So that's the end of the positive stuff. The negative stuff is when you listen to the likes of Dominic Cummings and Lee Kane, how on earth did they ever get the jobs that they got? They seem to be incapable of expressing themselves clearly, of understanding the gravity of the situation. You couldn't write this in a more despicable way that would make a television drama that we would all think, my goodness me.
They were more capable than Boris Johnson, I think they were.
Well, I agree that Boris Johnson
I don't think Dominic Cummings is an idiot. Nor is Lee Kane.
I think that they are inappropriate for the roles that they had. I also think that, of course, we're seeing a light.
Why do you think that?
I think that because the way that they have briefed, the way that they communicated, the way that they operated, the way that they're telling these stories to us is contemptible. And I also think that...
Why? He's telling us the truth.
He's telling the truth.
He's telling us the truth.
And we've got them saying here...
What's wrong with that?
Cummings says, I've literally said the same thing 10 effing times, and he still won't absorb it. The problem was not Cummings and Kane. The problem was Boris Johnson.
No, I think that there is a problem with our politicians, but I also think that if, for example, you're telling somebody 10 effing times, then clearly you're not very effective at your job. And I'm sorry, the way that they've behaved and the conduct since, I think, is abominable. And I look at all of the results that we've got. What we've got is that we've got a massive blame storm going on here, which is instead
blame storm.
Exactly.
There's no such word.
You've got people blaming each other trying to come out of this looking good, as opposed to going back to your very first point, Kevin, which is what the hell is the point of this investigation? This is pointless. We are seeing point scoring and pointless commentary.
Agree with you there, absolutely.
Yeah, but this is people blaming Boris Johnson. This isn't everyone pointing at each other. This is everyone pointing to the people in charge.
And to the civil service.